Right, okay, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's video. And today we're going to focus a little bit more on the reball process for one of these BGA chips. And I've received quite a few messages this last couple of weeks with regards to people attempting this and not getting very far. And it seems to me that whenever I've asked, if you've got any photos of your work and what you're doing, it seems to be a common theme that either the chips aren't clean enough, or that they've got far too much flux on. And I figured this was a very, very good way to actually show you what I mean. So we're going to get a bit of light on this APU for you there. And essentially you can see there that I have already removed a good part of the actual sort of lead-free solder which was already on this chip. And what you should also be able to see, of course, is that the surface of that chip is looking remarkably clean. So what we've done is, if you watch our PS4 APU reballing tutorial, and that, to be honest, will cover you for pretty much any, BGA really you can think of, to be honest. The things that they tell you to do, to be honest, are transferable between different types. So if you have a look on that, you'll be able to see that what we actually do is get some leaded solder. And we run it across the surface of the BGA in question, and then we get some more flux, and we get some of this desolder braid, and then we actually go around the surface of the APU itself, and we get up all the old leaded and lead-free stuff, so that the surface is nice and flat, and all the pads are nice and flat. And basically, then what we do is we get some IPA. And we squirt that over the surface, and we give it a good brush down, and then we get a lint-free cloth, and we just go over the top. And then we actually can see the end result looks something like this. And you can see how clean and tidy and shiny those pins look. So as you can see there, there's no remnants of any solder on there. The pads look nice and flat. And like I say, you can see there that they all look uniform in colour. There's no yellow sort of from contaminants of old flux residue or anything like that, or any sort of signs of old solder stuck to any of those pads. And this really is nice and clean. And if you take the end of your finger and run it across the surface, you'll be able to feel there, or you would be able to feel, at least if you could feel mine, that it is flat to the touch. You can't feel any lumps, bumps, or deviations in the surface. You can't feel the pads underneath your finger. It all just feels like a sheet of glass, to be honest with you, and that is what you're aiming for. And the way I like to think of it is, think of it as brain surgery. Yeah, that works. Effectively the APU is the brain of your PS4. Well, I'll tell you what, you're doing surgery on it. You need a nice, clean, sterile environment, and it's the same for the base of your APU when you come to reballing it. So remember, you're effectively doing brain surgery on this thing, so treat it as such. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go over how to actually apply the correct amount of flux to this thing, because again, this is where people seem to be going wrong. So what we're going to do is we are going to take a pot of flux with a brush, okay, and I am going to get a very small amount on this brush, and that's it. So you can see there we've got more or less a sort of a pea-size amount there, right? Okay, and I'm just going to pop it in the middle. Okay, and I'm going to paint it around this centre square. Okay. So just around that centre square there, and that's it. That's all you need. Right, okay, so what we're going to do then is we're going to get the edge of this is an offcut from an old plastic business card, but it's one of the sort of credit card type ones. And I'm just going to go and I'm going to spread this out from the centre. And I'm going to go immediately left. And you can see there now we've actually got a sort of roll of that now on the edge of that card. And then I'm going to go out the other way. And I'm going to go from edge to edge. Okay, and then I'm going to run that up and down. Okay, and I'm going to spin it around 180 degrees, and I'm going to repeat it back the other way. And I'm just going to overlap each stroke slightly. So what this is going to do, this is going to coat the surface of the BGA with the appropriate amount of flux. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn it 90 degrees. So I've been stroking it lengthways there, so I'm going to go against in the opposite direction. So as we were going left to right, now we're going up and down, if you like. Okay, and I'm going to spin it 180 degrees again. And I'm going to repeat that. Okay, so if you look at the surface of your BGA now, in the light, and at this moment you're not looking for anything too spectacularly beautiful, but what you want to see is in the light. I don't know if I'll be able to get this on camera for you, maybe. Oh, there we go. So you can see there now that it's not particularly flat as such, but you can see there the surface is nice and wet. You might also see there in the bottom corner we're just missing a little bit. So you see there in that bottom right hand corner there? Oh no, there you go. So you can see there that the surface of our BGA is nicely coated and it looks wet, but you can see that there's quite a few lines and runs in it. You can also see maybe down the edges that we've got a collection of flux there up the sides, and the same along that bottom edge. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go and we're going to remove that, because that's all excess. And that's going to pool up on the edge of our APU chip, and we don't really want that. So just run your card along the edge and angle it up slightly so it actually encourages the flux to draw up onto the card. Okay. So that's got the excess from around the edge. And then what you want to do is you want to get like a full-size credit card, if you like, or one of these thermal paste spreading cards or something like that. Something with a relatively flat edge. And something that's wider than your APU. And then just gently stroke it across the surface. You don't want to be too heavy because we don't want to be taking off too much. We just want to smooth out what we've already got on there. And again, just run it back and forth a couple of times, rotate it 90 degrees. And once you're happy, rotate it 90 degrees once more. Okay. And then you want to check it in the light again. And you can see there now that the distribution of light over the surface of that is looking a lot smoother. Okay, so to actually look at the surface of the BGA, you can't actually see any flux on there. It literally just looks shiny. And you can see that we've coated each side, including the corners, and it's all reflecting light. And that's good. So that's what we want. So once we've got that, we of course take our APU stencil. And of course, if you were watching the APU Reball tutorial, you should have already lined up before you applied your flux. Check the alignment there. Now, my old stencil that I had was pretty awful, and about half of the holes on the stencil were actually out of a line with the rest of the BGA. So I used to have to sit there for about 20 minutes every time I did one of these things and start manually pushing balls into pads. So this is the first time I've used this stencil, but it does line up a hell of a lot nicer, so hopefully we're going to get a bit more joy. So, of course, your stencil needs to be nice and clean as well, because any contaminants on there are just going to cause balls to stick in the holes, or, you know, worse still, your balls are going to pick the contaminants up off the surface of the stencil, and then that's going to go onto your chip, which may prevent the pads from bonding to the balls, and then that will cause the balls to wander, and then you're obviously going to get a bit of a mess. Now, every now and again, you will get it where the balls will stick in the hole, or the odd ball will. And there's not really a lot you can do to avoid that, as long as there's not too many there. So we're just going to pour on a decent helping of balls there. Okay, we're just going to pick that up and make sure you get hold of the top, and we're just going to spin that round. We're going to draw any excess down into the ball channel there, and we're just going to pour those back in. Kind of awkward trying to do this on camera, so I'm just going to get it a bit closer to myself. Okay. So we're largely happy with that. So now we've got that, we're just going to check to make sure we've got no excess balls on the stencil. It doesn't look like we have. There's one or two there just sat at the top. You might be able to see just there. So we're just going to pick those out, because of course when we come to lift the stencil off, the last thing you want is that running back down through another hole. Okay, so there's nothing there now. So what we're going to do is we're just going to pick the stencil up in the corners and we're going to gently lift it up. So up and away. And you can see there now, we've actually got no balls stuck in the holes. That's nice and clean. There's nothing stuck on the backside there. What you may find is every now and again you'll see there, sometimes you can catch a little bit of flux in the corners. That's normal, but make sure obviously you wipe that off with a bit of IPA before you reball your next chip. If you do it now as well, it's easier to get it off rather than when it's sat there and cured for a couple of days in the open air, because it tends to go a little bit sticky. And then of course you want to check your alignment on your balls. Any balls that look like they're wandering off the pads or they're not quite seated squarely, you're just going to want to go and nudge them back in. That's actually looking rather nice. As you can see there, that those are all looking relatively nice. Now then, if I'd have been using my previous stencil there, they wouldn't look like that, I can tell you. So I'm just going to go around and I'm just going to check, because, you know, there may be one or two that do get caught just as you lift the stencil off. Ah, yes. And then, of course, you've got the other issue whereby sometimes I'd rather stick to your tweezer blade than the actual chip. Okay, so otherwise that's looking quite nice, and we're happy with those. So we're just going to pop this across into my other stencil. Okay, so you want to make sure it's fairly flat. And that does appear to be. There we go. And then before we go put this back on the Jovi to actually set the balls, what we're going to do is we're just going to check the alignment of these balls again on their pads and just make sure that none have moved or that we've caught any, or that any have rolled during the transfer. Okay, so there's one or two there in that back corner. I'm just going to go and nudge back, because they're not miles off, but okay, so that's good. So what we're going to go and do now is we're just going to go line this up on the Jovi. Okay, so you can see the little piece of yellow tape there. What I do is I get the thermocouple there, and I just hook it underneath that piece of tape. And then just put the very edge of the probe onto the bottom corner of the surface of the APU there. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we're just going to line up the centre of the APU, make sure it's sat square. Okay, so that looks nice there. Dots in the middle. Okay, so that's all looking rather nice. So what we're going to do is we are going to swing our top heater over. Okay, so that's that done. And I'll get you a better view of this in a moment. So we're going to move our upper heater. We're going to go to manual mode on the Jovi. Upper heater set to 100%. Middle and side heaters are set to 0. And then we're going to get some fume extraction on this thing. So fume extraction is particularly important. And these things, of course, do draw if you've got a proper fume extraction system such as the one I'm using here. They do actually draw more air than you give them credit for, and the movement of that air across the surface of the APU can actually be quite forceful, particularly when the flux starts to activate and the balls do start to wander onto their pads. And what it can do is it can actually pull the balls, and of course they are very fine pitch, and it won't take much to actually move them onto places where we don't want, i.e. onto neighbouring pads and into other balls. So make sure that the fume extraction head is close enough to actually get the fumes, because you don't want to be breathing them, but not close enough where it actually pulls the airflow across the surface of the BGA to actually start the balls rolling around and moving, because you don't want that. So you want it a reasonable distance away from the actual APU itself. So that's what we've got there. So we've got it set probably 7 or 8 centimetres away from the top heater there, so that should be fine. So what we're going to do is we're going to stop this video, and I'm going to cut it now, and let me move the camera so you can actually see the balls, and then we can get them to sit. So join me in a second, boys and girls, and we can watch and see what happens. Right, okay, so we've got our APU there set up on the Jovi now, and we've got our profile set. So we're just going to start the fume extraction, so this might get a little bit noisy, and then we're going to run the profile, and then you'll be able to watch and see what the balls do. Okay, so profile's running now. Okay, so you can see the flux themes there just starting to activate, and we're drawing those out now. We're up to 113, 114 degrees at the surface of the BGA. So what you'll start to see shortly is the balls actually lining up and going straight onto their pads, hopefully. Just approaching 130. 135. So any second now, in the next sort of 30 seconds to a minute, you should start to notice those pads and the balls line up and merge nicely. Just approaching 160. .165. So we're just going to make sure that this has had enough time there to soak the heat and actually ensure that all those balls are successfully merged onto their pads now. They are looking nice and straight. Approaching 175, so we're just going to have a look now. So I'm just going to stop this, they look nice. Yep, those look really nice. So I'm just going to take you off the tripod. And you can see those flux themes are still being drawn away, so that's good. Okay, and as you can see there now, all those balls are nicely on the pads, and that is a successfully reballed APU, so our BGA is good to go, and that's been it. So as you can see, it's really rather easy and there's not a lot to it. It's just a case of getting the preparation right and the rest all falls into place. So thanks for watching, and I hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll see you on the next vid.